Transportation Security Administration. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare the subcommittee in recess at any point. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the horrific shooting that occurred at an elementary school in Texas this week. My heart goes out to the victims and their families, and my gratitude goes to the first responders and the medical professionals who helped to prevent even more loss of life and who are continuing to provide care to our victims. It is unfathomable that we are dealing with a situation so similar to Sandy Hook massacre that occurred nearly 10 years ago, but yet we seem incapable of taking action to prevent more tragedies from occurring. To those who stand in the way of sensible gun reform measures that are supported by a strong majority of Americans, I ask, when will it be enough? When will there be enough sacrifices made and loss of life? And now I'd like to turn to today's topic. I want to thank our witness for today, Administrator David Pukowski, for joining us to discuss the state of the TSA and the agency's budget request for fiscal year 2023. President Biden recently announced his intent to nominate Administrator Pukowski for a second 5-year term as TSA administrator. In that position, the administrator faces an enormous task. After more than 2 years of depressed air travel due to the COVID-19 pandemic, more and more people are booking flights to go on vacation, visit family members, and do business. Passenger volumes in airports and aboard airplanes are approaching pre-pandemic levels, which equates to a heightened demand for TSA services, especially as the busy summer travel season approaches. The president's budget request contains several proposals to help TSA prepare for the 4.5% increase in travelers over pre-pandemic levels that the agency expects in FY 2023. Most notably, the budget request contains a historic proposal to invest in our transportation security officers, or TSOs, by raising their pay, expanding their collective bargaining rights, and enhancing their access to the Merit System Protection Board. The proposal would increase TSO pay by 30% on average, finally providing pay in line with what workers at other government agencies receive for similar work. Improving pay and workplace rights is essential to addressing TSA's longstanding challenges with employee morale and retention. I was proud to vote in favor of Chairman Thompson's bill, H.R. 903, the Rights for the Tsa Workforce Act of 2022, when it passed the House 2 weeks ago. We must continue to build on that momentum and fully fund the budget proposal's workforce initiatives, as well as enact H.R. 903 to make these changes permanent. Unfortunately, the budget request does not include a serious proposal for paying for these initiatives. The budget proposal reclaiming approximately $1.5 billion in revenue from aviation security fees that are slated to go toward reducing the deficit in FY 23. And while I support ending the diversion of these fees, the legislative proposal submitted by the administration would treat these funds as offsetting collections. So TSA's direct appropriations would be reduced on a dollar-for-dollar basis for each fee dollar returned to the agency. Doing so would be a change in accounting, but would not increase the total funding available to TSA. Nevertheless, as the chairwoman of this subcommittee and a member of the Appropriations Committee, I am committed to finding a solution to this budget shortfall. In addition to investing in TSA's people, The budget request reflects TSA's plan to continue operationalizing innovative technology that will screen passengers and their belongings more quickly and effectively. As part of those efforts, TSA proposes $107.6 million for computed tomography or CT equipment through the Checkpoint Property Screening System or the CPSS program to screen passenger property at airport checkpoints. I'm a supporter of the CPSS program, along with many of my colleagues on this committee on both sides of the aisle. Acquiring and deploying CT machines at the rate needed to encounter current threats to transportation will require more than the budget's proposal, which would not put TSA on pace to finish deploying machines to every screening lane until FY 2036. In fact, this program should be funded at a level closer to the $336 million authorized for FY 23 under Ranking Member Katko's bill, HR 6827, which this committee advanced in March. When it comes to technology investments, I also believe TSA must be more robust in its efforts to provide opportunities to small and minority-owned businesses in order to drive competition and innovation. I have only scratched the surface of important issues facing TSA. I hope we will have time to explore others today, such as firearm encounters at checkpoints, cybersecurity efforts, counter-drone authorities, and surface transportation security in light of the recent shooting on the New York City subway. I appreciate the administrator's willingness to delve into these important issues with members of this subcommittee. And with that, I'll now recognize the ranking member of the subcommittee, the gentleman from Florida, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I too share your thoughts on the tragedy in Texas, and I'm glad that I live in the state of Florida where we've taken active measures to protect our children by fortifying schools and making sure that all schools have armed police officers there to mitigate and avert the threat created by madmen and women that want to hurt our children. And so, again, I'm very, very proud of what we do in Florida. I'm very proud of what I did as mayor of Miami-Dade County, also having priority response teams to make sure that when such a threat occurs in any part of Miami-Dade, we have trained officers that will respond in an instant. All of our officers in Miami-Dade County are equipped with enhanced body armor and the weapons needed in order to confront such situations, because if we're going to ask our men and women in blue to help protect us, we need to give them the equipment that they need to do it. So thank you so much. And now I want to thank you again for holding this hearing. I thank the TSA Administrator, David Pekoski, for being here to discuss the fiscal year 2023 President's budget request for the agency. The last 2 years have been very difficult for our country, and I applaud the men and women of the TSA for their continued dedication to securing the nation's transportation system. Over 23,000 TSA employees have been infected with COVID-19, and tragically, 36 employees have died. I commend Administrator Pekoski for the flexible workforce and leave policies that he implemented during the COVID-19 national emergency. These important workforce-centered policies were possible thanks to the authorities granted by Congress in the Aviation and Transportation Security Act of 2001. The President's budget projects an increase in air travel volume of 4.5% for the next year. My home airport, Miami International Airport, is already seeing a rise in passenger volume with over 4 million travelers this month. Matter of fact, airport director told me that MIA is the fastest growing airport in the world. This summer, TSA is expecting to screen upwards to 3 million passengers daily, which would beat the pre-pandemic record. I look forward to hearing from TSA on their hiring and retention plan to ensure that the required number of screeners are in place at airports nationwide. I'm pleased that the President's budget finally requests funding for pay raises for TSA's frontline workers. During my time in Congress, I have vocally supported the need for increased salaries for transportation security officers and federal air marshals. I share my colleagues' concerns that pay for the frontline needs to be raised, and I hope to learn more details today on how the administration will ensure that salary increases are fully funded. I do have concerns with the lack of investment for aviation security technology in the president's budget. The request for computed tomography, TSA top procurement priority, was only $105 million for 108 systems. It's going to take 15 years for all CT systems to be procured and deployed at airports. I think it's a little bit excessive. Nationwide, in addition, there are limited or no funding requests for credential authentication technology, advanced imaging technology, biometrics, and detection at range. And I want to hear from the administrator today on what more can be done to prioritize and accelerate these important security capabilities. Lastly, I'm pleased that Administrator Pekoski has been nominated to serve another 5 years at TSA. The agency has historically struggled with instability at the top, which is the primary reason that Congress enacted the 5-year term into law in 2018. I thank Administrator Pekoski for his continued service and steady leadership at such a critical moment in our nation's history. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Jimenez. I'm reminding members that the committee will operate according to the guidelines that are laid out by the chairman and the ranking member in their February 3rd, 2021 colloquy regarding remote procedures. I will now welcome our witness today. Mr. David Pekoski is the administrator of the Transportation Security Administration. He was nominated and confirmed to the position in 2017 for a 5-year term and was recently renominated by President Biden for a second term. During this time as the head of TSA, he has stepped in to serve as the acting Secretary and Deputy Secretary of Homeland Security on different occasions. Before coming to TSA, Administrator Pekoski served as the 26th Vice Commandant of the Coast Guard. We want to thank him for his continued service and welcome you here today, Mr. Administrator.
Thank you,
Without objection, the witness's full statement will be inserted in the record. And I now ask Mr. Pekoski to summarize the statement for 5 minutes. Sorry for the interruption, Mr. Pekoski.
No, sorry for my interruption, ma'am. Madam Chairwoman, Ranking Member Jimenez, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. First, I share both of your thoughts on the tragic shooting at Robb Elementary in Uvalde, Texas, and I think it just impacts all of us in such a profound way. I do thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today and for your work in providing the authorities and advocating for the resources TSA needs to perform its mission. I have the great honor of representing our dedicated employees who vigilantly stand the watch today, as they have for the past 20 years, protecting our nation's transportation systems. With them in mind, I will provide a brief update on our progress towards our strategic priorities and highlight the authorities and the resources TSA needs in the coming years to continue on this path. 3 strategic priorities guide us. First, to improve security and safeguard the transportation system. Second, to accelerate action. And third, commit to our people. TSA's most important asset is our people. We cannot be successful in our vital mission without a professional, engaged, and enabled workforce. That's why commit to our people is a strategic priority, and why attracting and retaining our transportation security officers, federal air marshals, and other frontline and support personnel is critically important for our country's security. As you know, significant parts of TSA's workforce are underpaid relative to other federal employees. This continues to impede our ability to improve the overall employee experience and to recruit and retain staff at the levels our mission and the public demands. This is most acute in our screening operations. 81% of our uniformed officers make less than their GS equivalent, and 50% of non-TSOs receive pay that is lower than their counterparts in most other federal agencies. This is unfair, has mission impact, and I ask for your support to put us on an equitable footing with the rest of government. I am thankful the full House recently passed H.R. 903, the Rights of the TSA Workforce Act of 2022. To provide the funding to address this long-term pay inequity, the FY23 budget includes an additional $871 million to ensure TSA employees are paid fairly. It also requests an additional $121 million to establish labor relations support to manage expanded labor benefits for TSOs and the right to appeal adverse personnel actions through the Merit Systems Protection Board. This will provide the labor relations framework called for in HR 903 and will put our transportation security officers on an equal footing with the rest of government. On May 2nd, the administration delivered to Congress a legislative proposal to increase the availability of funding to resource TSA's strategic priorities, including pay equity and full collective bargaining rights. Right now, part of the fee that passengers pay every time they buy an airline ticket goes directly to deficit reduction, not to offset the costs of providing aviation security. The legislative proposal that's been drafted for your consideration would end this diversion of aviation passenger security fee revenues and instead use all of that revenue to offset the appropriated funds needed for aviation security. This funding, $1.52 billion in FY23, is very close to the first full year implementation costs of pay equity. If these longstanding pay challenges are not fully addressed in fiscal year 23, I am concerned that it would lead to even higher rates of attrition and significantly undercut our recruitment efforts. We can't let this happen because this is a time when we need to grow. It is going to be a very busy summer with travel starting this very weekend. Furthermore, we expect that the year-over-year passenger growth rates in FY23 and beyond will return to pre-pandemic levels. Our next strategic priority, Accelerate Action, recognizes that our people can be most successful if they have the right tools for the job. It is imperative we quickly strengthen checkpoint screening operations by continuing our investment in advanced technology. This will improve screening effectiveness, efficiency, and the passenger experience. To that end, the FY23 budget includes $105 million for the checkpoint CT X-ray systems and $19 million for on-person screening improvements. TSA's next strategic priority is to secure and safeguard the nation's transportation system. This requires a commitment to technology, strong partnerships, and the agility to meet emerging threats. Across the transportation sector, TSA continues to work with the owners and operators of critical transportation infrastructure to build cybersecurity resilience. I want to highlight the work of the oil and natural gas pipeline companies, freight, passenger, and transit rail systems, and airlines and airports for their work in rapidly implementing the cybersecurity directives and security program changes we issued over the past year. With respect to aviation security, I ask for your continued support to authorize a limited test of one-stop security. This will improve security of participating inbound international flights and create efficiencies in international air travel. Finally, the domestic Counter-Uas National Action Plan recently released by the White House recommends providing TSA with permanent authority to conduct Counter-Uas activity in restricted airspace around transportation infrastructure. Thank you for the oversight hearing you recently held in this matter. A permanent authorization is very important to ensuring we continue our progress in addressing this threat. Chairwoman Watson-Coleman, Ranking Member Jimenez, and members of the subcommittee, thank you again for your strong support and the opportunity to testify before you today. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Administrator. I want you to know that you answered my first question to you. So without objection, members who are not on the committee, if there are any, I can't see, but if there are any, please allow them to be seated and allow them to question the witness. I want to thank you for your testimony. I want to remind all of the members of the subcommittee that we will each have 5 minutes to question the panel. And I'll now recognize myself for the first questions. Thank you for your comments regarding the necessity to fund, for Congress to fund the additional resources to be able to pay the TSOs and other TSA employees a fairer wage, commensurate with what other agencies pay likable individuals. And also thank you for your support for the additional issues of bargaining rights and merit-based access. I agree with you that this really impacts your ability to not only recruit, but to retain. And as we see the travel increase, and we see the new technologies that you're bringing on board, we need an educated, experienced, and well-trained workforce. And so to that degree, I salute your making that a priority, and it certainly is one of mine. But you, Mr. Pekoski, 55% of TSA's workforce is made up of people of color, making it one of the most diverse agencies in government. However, TSA's senior leaders look quite different. Of TSA's 66 federal security directors managing large workforces, 53 are white and 54 are men. I'm frustrated by the lack of TSA's progress in diversifying its senior ranks. And I understand that TSA is planning to hire a chief diversity officer to help address this and other issues, but it has taken quite a while. When do you think this is going to happen? What will be the role of the chief diversity officer, and how can you ensure that the position is appropriately empowered, located organizationally, and funded?
Chairman Watson Coleman, first, to go back to the pay issue just briefly, that is my top priority. It is so important for this agency that we get to the point where we pay our workforce fairly, that I will exert every effort I can to answer questions and to help Congress consideration in passing the proposal in the FY23 budget. With respect to diversity, I agree with your comment, and that is also a very top priority of mine. We have established a DEI, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer position in TSA. It's brand new.
I'm sorry, I cannot hear you. You're on mute.
I don't think so.
I hear you now.
Okay, sorry. We established a Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer position in TSA. I believe that we are one of the only agencies in the federal government that has such a position. This is different from our civil rights, liberties, and the Office of Traveler Engagement. I expect to bring a DEI officer on at the SES level sometime within the next month. We are very close to the end of that hiring process. And what I've asked that person to do in the position to perform is to take a look at the Inclusion Action Committee plan that was submitted. We formed an Inclusion Action Committee back in 2020, right after the George Floyd murder. And they put forth some excellent recommendations as to how we can address this from a very strategic level within the agency. The Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer, DEI officer, will report directly for me. We'll have the financial resources necessary to continue with the IAC's work. And that Inclusion Action Committee is not just a one-shot committee. This is going to be a continuing committee within the agency. We just solicited for a new slate of members to come in. So we'll change out the members on a rotating basis over the course of the years. But I pledge to you that this is an extremely high priority for TSA. And I think that our diversity at the entry level of the agency, to your point, ma'am, ought to be reflected in the senior levels of the organization. And I will do everything I can to get us to that point.
Thank you, Mr. Pekoski. And to that end, could you lay out for us some of the plans that TSA has for providing sort of career opportunities and pathways for those who can be promoted into leadership? What will you actually be expecting your offices to do?
Yes, ma'am, and that's a really important point, because I think to be successful, this needs to be embedded throughout the organization. And time and time again, when we ask an employee how they feel about the work environment, how they feel about their potential for advancement in the agency, oftentimes they're most affected by their direct supervisor. And so we need to put a lot of effort towards training our direct supervisors in how to develop the men and women that work for them and how to advocate for them in their careers. And so I think that effort in and of itself will be significant for TSA. But the other part of this that is very important is to see from the top that there is not just a momentary look at these issues, that there is a persistent look at how we're doing and a persistent check on our own metrics. How are we doing in bringing diversity into all levels of the agency? When you look at just the senior level, you really have to look down a couple and to see, hey, how much diversity do you have in the middle management that will become your senior leaders in a few years? And so I think it needs to be a very holistic approach across the agency.
Thank you, Administrator. I think we should pursue that just a little bit more at maybe in the second round, because having this desire to do it, but then thinking about how we can hold people accountable and get it done is like a whole nother discussion. I'd now like to recognize the ranking member, Mr. Jimenez from Florida.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Given that there's really not bipartisan support for the agency's wholesale move to Title V, and that Congress is not likely to make changes to the 911 passenger security fee, can you commit to this committee that DHS will raise the pay for the TSA frontline workforce regardless?
Sir, and DHS is under significant fiscal pressure across the entire enterprise, and I would fund part of this out of my own appropriation if I had the room to do that. I simply do not. And when you're looking at $871 million for 3/4 pay for the first year, and then moving up to 1.5 billion in the second year, that's a figure that is well beyond the agency's ability to resource. It needs to be additional top line. Sir, as you know, and as the chairwoman mentioned, I spent some time as the deputy secretary of the department twice. And so I had oversight over the department's budget. The department's budget is incredibly tight. There's no room at all in that budget for initiatives that are substantial like this. The other thing I would say is that we tried, and I received great support from the Congress to make some marginal improvements. We began in FY21 by adding more funds into the pay accounts to put some initiatives in place. And while they were beneficial and while they were successful, they weren't anywhere near enough to get us where we need to be. When you're talking about a 30% pay differential at the transportation security officer level, and then even beyond that, if you look at the federal air marshals, there's about a 20% gap with what they would get if they were working in another federal agency. It's just not possible for us to close that gap within our own resource base.
Now, if Congress had moved your agency into, I guess they call it Title V, okay, then wouldn't you have needed this money then? In other words, if we had moved you to Title V, you wouldn't have been able, you would have needed an increase in order to achieve that. Is that correct?
So my understanding is if it was just a move to Title V without a corresponding appropriation to do that, yes, sir, you're right. We would have to find the money, and the we would be not just TSA and not just the Department of Homeland Security. It would be the rest of the federal government would have to find a way to fund this.
Did you request additional funding for pay raises for TSA employees?
Yes, sir. In the 23 budget, $871 million.
Did you request it in the president's budget?
It is in the president's budget.
It is in the president's budget.
Yes, sir.
So the additional money is in the budget request right now?
It is. Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. So that if we approve the budget, then you can give the raises.
Yes, sir. But you would have to approve the budget and approve the offset that's offered, which is to end the diversion of the aviation security passenger fee to deficit reduction and put it back to supporting aviation security.
Okay. I don't quite understand that. Okay. So is that who took that step? Is that the administration who took that step, or who took that step?
Yeah, well, that is part of the president's proposal in the FY23 budget. So he proposed for three-quarters of your funding, because you can't expend the funds in the first quarter because it will take you about 90 days to retool your pay systems. But for 3/4 of your funding in the first year and then full year funding thereafter. So let's just talk about full year funds for a moment. Let's say $1.5 billion in the first year of implementation. The source of funds was to end the fee diversion that began in 2013 that was supposed to be temporary, that was extended again. Now it goes out to, I believe, fiscal 27. And what that fee does, as I understand it, is revenues come in from those fees, and they directly offset TSA's appropriation. So what that means is lower levels of appropriated funds are needed to get us to the overall level of appropriations that TSA requires. So our budget is a combination of passenger fee revenue offset and appropriations.
Could we do something at airports to increase passenger fees in order to fund TSA, or is that something that you guys can't get your hands on?
So we don't think we need to do that. There's, and it's just by coincidence, but there's 1.5 billion that's being collected from passengers every time they buy a ticket. That's not going to any purpose with respect to aviation security. It's going right to deficit reduction. And so what we're proposing is just end that practice, put it back to its original purpose.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. My time's up and I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member. The chair will now recognize other members for questions they may wish to ask the witness. In accordance with the guidelines that were laid out by the chairman and ranking member in their February 3rd, 2021 colloquy, I will recognize members in order of seniority, alternating between majority and minority members. And members are also reminded to unmute themselves when recognized for questioning. The chair recognizes Representative Norman for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Administrator Pekoski, thank you for coming today. You've got a big job. I don't envy your what you're facing now. I guess your job is going to be is heightened because of what this administration is doing to let pretty much everybody in this country, without any regard for who's coming in, whether they've got a criminal background. It's just pretty much open doors for everybody. And you're going to face the backlash or having to deal with it as your job as administrator of the TSA. You were going over your main focus points and main goals could you list your top 3 that you consider priorities for you?
Yes, sir. The top 3 would be first and foremost, achieving pay equity. That's so critical to our continued success. The second would be to bring advanced technology into place in our screening process, because that makes our screening much more effective and also more efficient as we do it. And the third would be to apply new technologies to get at emerging threats. For example, Counter-Uas operations. I mean, we see these threats developing. Some of them are already present, and we just need to have the capability to fully detect, track, identify, and to counter if necessary.
What about would you say the overriding priority of you is to keep Americans safe while they travel?
So my overriding priority is to ensure that there's not a terrorist attack on the transportation system.
Okay, so that's for is it fair to say your overriding priority is for in your job to keep Americans safe above and beyond anything else?
Yes, sir. To keep the transportation system secure.
Okay. Now there's some changes coming with TSA, reduced pat downs, gender neutral screening technology. Can you just briefly what kind of reductions in pat downs will you be administering to people, and will you be going by the a gender identification, or how will that work?
Yes, sir. That is for our on-person screening, and every single thing we do, if we change our procedures or if we change our technology, every time we do that, it has an enhancement, not a degradation to security.
Okay.
And so this new software that we're putting in our on-person screening system actually improves security, while at the same time it reduces the false alarm rate, because when you go through
let me just interrupt you. What I'm getting to, my time is running out. On you reduce pat downs, that is in the document that I've got in front of me that you're doing. How does that? What kind of reductions will you not be doing specifically? Just name me 2.
Yes, sir. I'll give you a very quick global answer. The technology has a false alarm rate. The new software reduces that false alarm rate. So some of the pat downs we currently conduct, we don't need to, because the technology has advanced. The software upgrades the technology to reduce the need for those pat downs.
Okay. Will that go on the biological sex?
Well, what the
instead of the
technology
gender
does.
identification?
Yes, sir. Currently in the current technology, the officer needs to select the gender that he or she sees in the passenger when the passenger approaches. The new software upgrades have no requirement to do that. The software is that much better. You do not need to select gender. It automatically checks everything, and its detectability is much better. So it's a security improvement.
So okay, but the pat downs, I guess the reduced pat downs are what you're focusing on with the new
No, sir.
technology that you're talking about.
We're actually focusing on both. We want to improve security, and in doing that, we found that we could reduce the false alarm rate, which means that some of the pat downs we have been doing with this new software upgrade won't be necessary. So we'll still do the pat downs that are necessary, but we won't do pat downs that now the technology has advanced to the point where we don't need to do them.
Okay, well, my time's running out, but I hope you will stress the security for this country of people getting on the airplane that are secure now. You're going to have challenges as never seen before, which is a direct responsibility of this administration, which you're just not doing. So I appreciate your time here and thank you so much.
Thank you very much. The chair now recognizes Representative Andrew.
Hi. Thank you, Chairwoman and Ranking Member, and thank you. I want to thank the Administrator for being here. You know, I think as you all know, the largest federal air marshal training center is located in my district in Atlantic City. And it's 85% of all training is done at this facility, which includes basic, advanced, and recurrent training. The center does an excellent job. Proud of the job they do in aiding and training our air marshals, and I'm proud to have its presence in my district. The Federal Flight Deck Office Program, which also is done at the facility, is another example of the great work the facility can do and does. I understand that there have been some delays and getting pilots into the program, which is concerning because given the increase in airline travel, especially in very recent months. Can you please tell me what steps the TSA is taking to address the delays, as well as what the TSA is doing to streamline the application process?
Yes, sir. Thank you for your question. And let me start by highlighting ACY in our training center up there, just like you did. It is a significant facility for us. Trains not just our federal air marshals, but we do conduct a lot of leadership training up at ACY at the facility there. You will see, sir, more training being conducted up there in the coming years because we're doing more centralized training rather than individual FAM field office training. So I appreciate all the work that the team does up there, and I appreciate your visits and your support of them in that regard. On the Federal Flight Deck Officer Program, it's a terrific program. It's been very, very valuable to us as an agency, to the American public for security as they're flying. We have started classes again for the FFDO program. So we have 8 classes going on this fiscal year, and there's 32 participants in each one of those classes. And then we're going to double that next year. So you'll have 16 classes with 32 participants per class. We're also looking at how we do the recurring training, because federal flight deck officers need to go through initial training in Artesia, New Mexico, and then they go through recurrent training. Those recurrent training sites are at Dallas, Fort Worth, at Atlantic City, and then we're developing one in Atlanta, trying to get to major hubs to make it easier for the federal flight deck officers. I'm going to conduct a review of the entire FFDO program over the next several months to find ways that we can make it even stronger. But in conclusion, let me just thank the pilots and the first officers that volunteer their time to participate in this program, because they add an additional layer of security for us, and to thank the carriers that permit them to do this. It's a great program, and I'm committed to making it as effective as we possibly can.
Thank you. So your sense would be that we're getting this delay issue, it will be under control. You're gonna grab this and run with it.
Yes, sir. It's well on its way to recovering from the pandemic.
Okay. Just to clarify from my mind, how often is the training provided to both officers and crew members? And how many crew members are trained on an annual basis?
Yes, sir. The crew members for example, since last July, we have trained over 3,200 crew members in self-defense training, and this is done by the Federal Air Marshals. And what we did this year is a little different than what we've done in the past. We used to do it at all of our Federal Air Marshal field offices. We found that it was better, more convenient. We got more participants if we used airline facilities to do it as well. And so roughly now about 80% of our crew member self-defense training is done in airline facilities. So I appreciate them providing us the facilities to conduct this training. Finally, one of the groups that are unsung heroes of the pandemic, particularly the past year, where there are so many in-flight instances of physical assault and just unruly behavior, it's the flight attendants that took the large brunt of that work. And I just think we all owe them an incredible debt of gratitude for the work they do.
I agree with you on that, and I thank you for your work as well. And with that, Chairwoman, I yield back.
Thank you, Congressman. I now recognize Ms. Miller-Meeks for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairwoman Watson-Coleman, and also thank you to Administrator Pekoski for being here with us today. As a physician, I'm very interested in the introduction of computed tomography, CT, for carry-on baggage screening, which provides higher fidelity screening, automatic threat detection, and the ability to detect smaller threat sizes. Passengers have a more seamless experience going through security and in handling their bags. And I think, Administrator, that you called this technology a game changer for the TSA. But the fiscal year 23 President's budget requests only $105 million for 108 systems. At this rate, it would take about 15 years to complete the deployment of CT. I realize that the budget top line is tight, but are you not being more aggressive to deploy this game changer technology at all airports around the country?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for the question. And it is a top line constraint issue. We are ready to purchase more of those systems. We have contracts in place. We just need to be able to execute them. And what was mentioned earlier by the chairwoman is it's going to take us until fiscal 36 to get this technology in place. That's a very, very long time. So with additional top line, additional resources, we could do it much faster. And this is a situation where you have a federal agency that has the contracts already in place. It's not like this is a concept. We've deployed a number already. We know exactly what we want to buy. We've got a good pipeline of companies that are in the competition to do this. We just need to, if we had more top line, we would buy more. It would be the answer.
So my assumption would be that was the, why the $19 million in funding was requested in the president's budget.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. The money for the CPSS, $100+ million, and the $19 million was to upgrade the software for the on-person screening system. So that's a lot less expensive because it doesn't require a hardware change.
I'm also pleased to see that the TSA's use of biometric technology at airport and checkpoints, as well as the rollout of mobile driver's license in some states. However, TSA still needs to procure over 3,500 credential authentic technology readers for identity verification at airports nationwide. The FY 2023 President's budget requested funding for only 75 CAT machines. And why is the amount so low? Did you request a higher amount?
Yes, ma'am. First on the credential authentication technology machine, you're right. It does validate the identity of a passenger, which is one of the very unique aspects of the U.S. Transportation security system. But the other thing that it does is it also checks in real time a passenger's risk status. So as the passenger inserts their driver's license, or now with mobile driver's licenses, just taps their iPhone on a reader in real time, that information is being compared to the risk profile that we have for passengers, whether a passenger is a pre-check, a standard, or a passenger who needs additional screening. Additionally, we have near real-time information on their flight status. So we know that they haven't made a change in their flight, that they do have a flight out of that airport on that day. So it's a huge enhancement. Part of the reason for the budget request is a little bit of supply chain issues, but it's a lot of lack of top line. Because these are individually, they're relatively inexpensive machines, but we just need a lot of them. We need about almost 3,600 of these machines across the system. A change we made about 2 years ago, just got approved by the department, is to put this technology in every single airport. It was originally envisioned only for the larger airports. But as you know, in our system, once you're in one airport, you're in the entire system. So it's important that we verify identity and make sure that the proper screening is provided based on a passenger's risk profile at the airport of entry.
And I've experienced it firsthand, and you're right. I think it's amazing technology that makes it also better for the TSA and seamless for the passenger. So thank you so much, Administrator Pikoski, for appearing today and for all the work you're doing at TSA. And we also agree that TSA and our flight attendants have really performed admirably during the pandemic at very difficult times. So thank you, Madam Chair. I yield back.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Miller Meeks. I now recognize Representative Sheila Jackson Lee for 5 minutes.
Can I be heard, Madam Chair?
Yes, you can.
Thank you so very much. Let me thank you for holding this hearing, and as well, let me thank the administrator for his service. We have some very challenging times. Let me just get an overall assessment, and my time is short, I realize it. Just a very brief assessment. And what do you feel the state of the agency is in the aftermath of the pandemic, meaning what your TSOs had to confront, being probably on the front line before COVID was really diagnosed. They were not prepared because of our lack of information in government. You subsequently provided shields and masks, but what is the aftermath of the pandemic on TSOs?
Spam, thank you for recognizing the TSOs. I mean, as you noted, they served throughout the pandemic to ensure that passengers could travel in this country, very similar to the service they provided when the government shut down for 35 days. They didn't stop their work then either. So I'm incredibly proud of the workforce. And you're right, we did everything we could when we had the knowledge to make sure we provided protections to this workforce, and we continue to do so today. The things we learned in the process is that we need to look at technology solutions that reduce contact. And if you think of we were just talking about the credential authentication technology, and I know, ma'am, you've probably used that technology as you've traveled. There's a lot less contact. You're not taking your driver's license and handing it to somebody and they're handling it. For example, or your passport, or when you go and use the CT X-ray, you take fewer things out of your carry-on bag. And a lot of the discrepancies that an officer might see on the image, they can resolve on the image, on the machine itself, without having to search a bag. And then if you think about
makes them safer.
Yes, ma'am. And then the next thing would be, if you look at the on-person screening, and in this budget is the proposal to improve the software for on-person screening, which makes security better and lowers the false alarm rate. With a lower false alarm rate, there are fewer pat-downs you do. And so that's probably the closest in the course of a screening operation that a passenger and a TSO come to each other. So if we can reduce that, that also provides more protection for everyone.
Now my time is very short, and let me ask you to abbreviate your answers on dealing with technology and security, the topic of this. You've implemented new screening technology technologies, the changes will undoubtedly have bumps as it is applied to the real world of consumer travel. There's some issue with women's clothing and algorithms. Can you just briefly and just, I have several questions. Are you handling this issue of inconsistency on the algorithm as it relates to this new technology? Yes or no?
Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry, your communication is very garbled. I think we've got a bad connection, so I couldn't hear your question.
Congresswoman, we cannot hear you.
Am I?
We were not able
Can
to
I be
hear your question.
heard? Apparently, the administrator can't hear me.
Congresswoman, we can't hear you. You're
Can you hear
trying
me now?
You're garbled.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. No. Allow us to, your time has expired as well, and perhaps you could work on this as we go through a second round of questioning. We could come back to you.
Thank you.
So, Administrator, we're going to go through an abbreviated second round of questions, and I'm going to start with a question that I have. This committee has long pushed TSA to expand its work with small and minority-owned businesses providing screening technologies. We understand that TSA has met some of its small business contracting goals, but has done so primarily through its service contracts rather than through screening technology awards. And too often, TSA has relied on a small handful of large companies to provide these screening technologies, which has limited competition and innovation. This has become very frustrating to us, as we've not seen the kind of progress on this topic. What has TSA done to proactively seek out small businesses and minority businesses that could offer innovative screening solutions? For example, has TSA made contact with small businesses that provide screening technologies in healthcare, in that industry? And also, do you believe a dedicated funding stream to support the research and development of promising technologies offered by small businesses would help to support innovation at TSA?
Yes, ma'am. I appreciate your comments, and you're right. I mean, we have actually met or exceeded all of our small business goals year after year, but that's primarily on the services side, not on the technology acquisition side. As we embarked on our CT acquisition, for example, we actively sought small business participation in that process, and we do still have a small business in active competition for CT qualification. They're not quite fully there yet, but they're still very much in the mix, if you will, for completing our process and then being able to compete for task order awards. One of the things that we are doing is we're requiring our vendors now to provide their hardware solutions in an open architecture format, which means that we would get the machine and the operating system for the machine, but it would produce the data from its image taking in a standardized format in a way that we could purchase through small business vendors and other vendors additional software layers that we feel would provide a whole lot more agility for us and a lot of opportunity for small businesses to participate in this procurement. So open architecture is one way of getting small business participation. And I would submit that we are leading in that effort as well. And then finally, very quickly.
Yeah, what about the dedicated funding stream? Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. We have conducted industry days. We have reached out to small businesses that do, because you're right, the CT X-ray technology is medical technology essentially. And we have been very aggressive in trying to garner small business participation. With respect to a dedicated funding stream, my concern with that, I don't have a conceptual objection to that at all. But my concern would be with a small, you already observed and other members have observed that our funding stream for this technology is small already. If it gets further restricted in terms of its use, it might slow us down in being able to put the technology we need in place. But the CT X-ray system, if the FY23 budget is funded as submitted, will still be only at 39% complete. So there's a lot of runway left in this acquisition, and the credential authentication technology will only be at 58%. So there's still a lot more opportunity there, and we are committed to making that aperture wider for small businesses.
Thank you. I now recognize Mr. Jimenez for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I have no further questions. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. I yield back.
Thank you very much. Then, in accordance with the sort of rotation between minority and majority, I will now recognize Representative Sheila Jackson-Lee.
Can I be heard?
Yes, ma'am. Speak while you can be heard.
All right, thank you. Let me continue. Administrator, thank you, Madam Chair. I do have a short period of time, and so if I can go back to the security issue, and this is about the algorithms based upon the new technology that you have. It's my understanding that there's some issue with women's clothing and the algorithms used to determine if secondary screening is necessary. So I want to know if you're aware of that, and have you addressed some of those difficulties in making sure that we have a strong security process, but that we limit the false positives? Yes or no?
Yes, ma'am. And we are working on other software upgrades for that technology and a hardware upgrade that will provide high definition sensors inside the existing architecture. So that should help address those issues as well. But we will continue to test for it and work on it. Can
you also tell me whether there is enhanced training regarding for the TSOs and management as it relates to human trafficking detection? And have you had on the system reports of efforts at human trafficking going through your security points, and how have you handled that? Yes, ma'am. We provide training on human trafficking. It's a very important priority for us to make sure our federal air marshals and our screening officers can identify the signs of human trafficking. We have had some cases where our officers have identified potential situations. The other thing very quickly is we are in the same cabinet department as Homeland Security Investigations. They do amazing work in this category, and we have a very, very strong relationship with them in this regard. And what has been the training protocols now for TSOs? A couple of years ago, we advocated for the training in the school in Georgia, and they went there immediately upon hire. How do you handle their training now to make them the most efficient and the most effective? Ma'am, we still use the Glencoe, Georgia facility for part of our training. We're opening up an Academy West, if you will. The TSA Academy is at Glencoe. The Academy West, another satellite, is at Las Vegas Airport, at Harry Reid Airport. That is still working in a development stage. It's got students going through it, but it'll be up to full speed beginning next year. And the other thing we're doing, very important, is we're taking that academy training, which is currently 2 weeks, and making it 3 weeks. That additional third week is focused on de-escalation techniques and trying to provide techniques for enhancing the passenger experience. If I might follow up with this quick question, Madam Chair. with respect to that, just quickly say, do they get the training upon hiring, or do they work for a little bit and then go to the training? Yes or no? Yes on hiring or later?
They get both times, ma'am. You know, we have for human trafficking training is believe what you're referring to. They'll get it upon hire through the
No,
academy.
just the
Uh,
regular training, sir.
the regular training, they
School,
get it upon.
going
Sure.
to schools. They go at the beginning?
They go at the beginning, usually within the first 6 to 8 months of their time in TSA, and then there's regular annual recurring training as well.
Right. Let me finish on this issue of question of poor morale. That deals a lot with the question of national security. And so, as you well know, you've gone through a period of allegations of mismanagement, poor procedures, retaliation against whistleblowers, etc. And in order to have a strong and effective team, which we all appreciate, they're the front line for security. And I want all of your TSOs and TSA to know that, how much respect I have for them and how much work I've done with them across the nation. But what are you doing now to deal specifically with that question so that we have a very sharply defined and efficient and proficient security team at TSA, at the TSO point of security in our airports and other places?
Yes, Representative Jackson, we've made good progress on all three of those categories. On retaliation, mismanagement, and whistleblower complaints. I mean, they're all down compared to where they were several years ago. So the trend lines are in the right direction. That doesn't mean we've taken our pedal off the gas on this at all, because it's really, really important that we make more progress in this regard. But I think too that our ability to pay people equitably will help with overall workplace morale. And it will also help us attract the very best people into TSA and to keep the talent that we have. So all those things together, I think will forecast for continued good progress in this area.
I take it that, Mr. Administrator, you believe that we are more secure because of your agency and your TSOs, that the nation is more secure?
Without question, yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much. And I do want to say, Madam Chair, it's because of our work and your work and Chairman Thompson that we have passed this very important reform bill for TSOs and TSA with the civil service structure and with the professionalism. And we hope that the Senate will move quickly to support our TSOs and this agency, because they deserve to be recognized as frontline for the nation's security. With that, I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative, and so noted. With that, I want to thank the administrator for his valuable testimony, very enlightening, and also to the members for their very important questions. The members of the subcommittee may have additional questions for you, and we ask that you respond expeditiously in writing to those questions. And the chair reminds the members of the subcommittee that the committee's record will remain open for 10 days. Thank you all. Without objection, the subcommittee stands adjourned. Have a good day.